All right, so today's topic is estimating the time schedule of the planned research steps. And we hope that the learning outcomes of today's webinar is that you better understand that research projects are rarely executed as planned, nor are they as linear as their planning and the subsequent writing up of the research does suggest. And more specifically, that you get a bit of a understanding on how to plan and draft your research project. We will talk that through. And for you to understand the difference in between a commercial project and a research project, and also what they have in common, and how you might want to cope with the component of uncertainty and emergence within research projects, as well as to how to adjust your research project and its individual steps as the research emerges and progresses. This is a very important skill that you will need to develop. And then we will go off the record and allow for some reflection on how your research plan initially emerged and subsequently adjusted and evolved. So, and if you have at that point in time any question or would want to look into your research projects, then you're very much welcome in doing so. Now, let's start it off with how to plan and draft your research project. Now, actually, I never really, before putting together these slides over the week, have thought about what is it and how do you forecast a research project differently than any other projects that I have been handling before. And now, if you look at the middle part, then this is a basic structure of a research project. It starts out with a research design phase. So once you put together the research problem, the questions, and the methodology, everything that's theoretical, which then is typically followed by a execution phase in which you carry out the research. And afterwards comes a research writing up phase. And for doctoral research, then there is a viva and graduation process usually involved. And afterwards, once you are through, there will be some postdoctoral work and publishing. So how do you forecast for that? If you assume that a typical research project has 3 years, then estimated breakdown, and a very simplified one could be that you take for the research design 6 months, the research execution phase 18 months, the writing up 9 months, viva and graduation 3 months, and then after 36 months, you are done and through. Now this might be the neat and nice way that often will be communicated and suggested on how to build up your research. But if you look into it a bit further and go a bit more into it, then the more granular structure of a research project would be what you see on the right side. And it's still a very simplified view, and it still assumes that research would be carried out in the linear way, following 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which as a matter of fact is not the case. But now let's just assume, for the reasons of simplicity and planning, that those 25 steps would be carried out in a linear way. And if you take the initial 36 months estimate and apply it to this file, then you will quickly see that there are a lot of blank spots that are still not covered. So for example, if you look into the research design phase, you will be seeing that actually a lot of what is in there is not even within the 36 months that you would consider as an official doctoral research phase where you are enrolled in a program. No, contrary to that, those research design elements are prior to program admission. So this is the time where you will be typically putting together your initial research outline, where you would be typically identifying the research problem or the wider issue that your research would be addressing. Then from there, you would derive your research problem and question framing. Then from there, you go to the more profound thesis research proposal, and that would then lead to the program admission. Now, in some of those cases, this is a time that will be the first year of your research about. So in the UK system, often year one would be dedicated towards just designing your research. And in that case, only point 1 and 2 would likely be the initial steps that you would be doing prior to admission. And then comes the fourth point already at number 3. And the research proposal is what you're working out during year one together with the literature review. Now you see, depending on the program where you apply, those steps vary. And why is this important? Well, it might be important for you to have a clear understanding about what is within the time of the official program duration that you are expected to do, and what are you expected to do prior to enrollment. So if you have a clear understanding about that, that will allow you to much better prepare for your research, and also to estimate then the time that you have during your research and how would that be broken down. Now, let's look into this a bit more in detail, and let's try to get the blank spot out. Now, if you take out the blank spots, then you quickly get to a time estimate well beyond a typical 3-year program duration. You are here already at 49 months. So this is above 4 years if you not even consider any publishing activity in there. That might set you further back in terms of time. If you see the first 6 months and say, okay, this is prior to admission, then you're within the 4 years time frame that typically doctoral programs are promoted, 3 to 4 years. Now, having said that, this is still a very optimistic estimate, and that quickly can change to something more around that number of 61 months. And if you hit this number, then you can foresee already a number of problems. For once, if you're enrolled in a full-time program, you will understand it's beyond, well beyond the official duration that you will be given. Second of all, you will see that this might means you will run out of funding at one point in time. If you are on a fully funded doctoral journey, then what happens after year 3 or 4 once the funding dries up? So this is something that you might to anticipate already, so to factor that in. Or if you are self-funded, then also you planned for the research to be done in 4 years. Therefore, your savings have been allocated in accordance to that. Now, you might want to reconsider that and have a more conservative planning of your research project. And you might also want to consider more the preparatory work, which is the research design, because as more time as you will invest in this earlier phase, as less time you will afterwards need for the research execution and the research write-up phase. Now, as I said, research is rarely linear. That means you don't do first 5, then you do 6, then you do 7, then you do 8. You will work on a number of things in parallel, and not only frontwards, but also front and back. So you will do a bit of literature review also once you are doing the data analysis, which is point 13 and 14. And once you analyze the data in itself, like at point 13, you might also will go back to the methodology to adapt it in accordance to how you structure your data. So as said, written in a linear way, yes, executed in a non-linear way. This enhances obviously the level of complexity on how to forecast the time that you will be spending for executing your research project. And This number that you see here, you likely only will get in hindsight, but in hindsight will not help you much to plan for your research. So I think it's critical for you to be aware about the time that you might end up spending on your research and which implications that will have. Implications on the funding, either the funding where you're on, or if you're self-funded, the money that you're earning in, but also implications of the trouble elements that you might be facing if you are on a 3 or 4 years program and you're still not done after 3 or 4 years. What then is your plan B? And a plan B often is to move from a full-time into a part-time doctoral program to do that transfer. So if you're enrolling into a program already at a very starting point, you might want to look into what is admittable in the program that you're enrolling at and what is not admittable, and which consequences you might be facing after 3 or 4 years once it comes to handing in your research. I think it's critical for you to be very conservative once planning your research project. Now, what is perhaps also not that visible in this journey that we are seeing here is that there is a lot of dead time in which you really can't do much. This starts with a program admission, which easily can take in between 2 to 9 months, depending on the type of program that you're applying, perhaps in the extreme case, even a 12-month period. So what are you doing in the meantime? Or is it anyway advisable to do anything in the meantime, because you do not know at which type of program you would be ending up, therefore you will not know what will be the exact research focus. So this is for you to take into account. If you do have time, you can obviously use it already for literature review, identification of related studies, or methodology workout. Likewise, there will be a lot of dead time or potential dead time at the initial research plan awaiting approval. It will need to get through ethical clearance. It might come back again to you to be improved. There might be some objections so that you would need to alter the research structure. So this, again, easily could set you back in between 1 to 6 months. How do you handle this time, this dead time? What are you doing during this period? Yeah. Another point is in the data collection. Now, the data collection frequently is seen as a one-time undertaking, while in practice it is not. It often happens that students need to collect data at various points in time because the data set was incomplete, or because there was the realization of data still not clear in itself, or missing, or the research suggests that different type of data still needs to be collected, or another dead time that comes in might be you schedule some research to be conducted within focus group or within some, let's say, a summer school. So those things that only can take place at certain points in time. So again, this is a point in time where you might end up losing time. And a final handling point for waiting time is the thesis proofreading. This is another part which can set you back in between 1 to 3 months. And if you handed in your thesis as a full piece and it comes back with lots of comments and with lots of grammar to be corrected, that easily will be another 1 or 2 months that it can take. Or if the thesis supervisor saying, no, this is still not sound, then that again can take time. Now, all of those dead times should be foreseen because they all will add up to and eat up the official times that you are in the program. So please be very conservative with handling time and with using the dead time blocks, and do something with it. Now, you can use the time, however, to prepare. For example, if you are waiting for getting final feedback on your thesis draft, you can already use that time for Viva preparation. Or the time for the Viva date to be scheduled, which by times can easily also take another 3 months. Use that time for Viva preparation. I think the best students that we've been, the best performing students that way around that we've been seeing are those that take the Viva preparation really serious, that spend a good 2 to 3 months on it. And the beauty of you using the time where your first and second supervisors are already reading through your thesis and providing feedback is if you at this point in time already prepare for the Viva, then you will clearly understand where you still have gaps and where your research is not round. Now, the advantage of that is obviously once you get your thesis back from your first and second supervisor, you still can take the learning into your thesis prior to submission. So if you know how to use that time and use it wisely, that will put you in a much better position at a later stage. And the same might be said for the program admission phase, right? I submit my initial research outline, and what do I do then? Do I just wait until I get an admission? Or do I go back and look again at my research outline and try to get deeper into the problem, understand what is the exact issue, which is the related literature, what is the exact research problem? Now, in both of the cases, at the research design point 4 case and also at the Viva preparation point 20 case, this afterwards can pay off double. It pays off once it comes to the oral defense of either your research proposal at point 4 or the oral defense of your full thesis at point 20. Yeah. So if you handle that time wisely, then this will pay off. Now, another dead time, which perhaps doesn't matter much to you, but we had students to whom it mattered because for any legal or other reason, is the time in between you passing the Viva and potentially receiving your doctorate degree. Now, some people would think, yeah, well, that's a question of days, but no. Be aware that easily can take another 6 to 9 months. So knowing that time, where it occurs and how to use it really can make a difference either at the admission phase or at the Viva phase. And generally also it will help you to plan better out your research. Unfortunately, for those that hoped to get some quick route on how to plan and forecast the time of their research, I regret to say there is none. It's a complex thing, and I think understanding that it is complex will help you to deal with it. Right. Are there any questions up to this point? No?
There's none in the chat section.
There's none in the chat. Okay, then let's come into number 2, understanding the difference in between commercial projects and research projects. Now, there are a number of differences. For once, if you're coming from the business side or ever have run a project, then you know projects are executed as planned. Right? This is a reason and the purpose of having a plan to afterwards execute something to plan. Now, in a research project, you're obviously also expected to have a plan, and as better the plan, as better the research. There's no arguing in that. But research is emergent, and therefore plans are subject to adaptation. So don't hold onto something that doesn't make any sense any longer because your research suggests there is another route to follow. Following. Yeah. Projects follow a linear pathway. Now, your research project is linear while it is not. We have seen points 1 to 25. We here see also a linear path, research design, execution, write-up. Yeah, it looks one directional, but it's multi-directional. And you're jumping front and back. I think this is also very well to be understood. And commercial projects have a well-defined timeline. We've seen already in the first part of the webinar that running out of time is a real risk in a doctoral research journey. and it's real. So please keep that in mind. Commercial projects come with clear milestones and deadlines that by default are fixed. That's why it's called a milestone and a deadline. Now, what we do have in a research project, we start out with a plan, so we also do have milestones and deadlines, with the difference that they are shifting and changing. And some of the milestones you not even know about at the start, because as the research progresses, knowledge becomes clear. As knowledge becomes clear, so do the milestones emerge. Yeah. That's a very different tool. A commercial project requires a trained and skilled person to plan and execute the work. It's actually a no-brainer, right? No one would sit a rookie doing something that one was not trained on and is not skilled. Now, the same goes for a research project, with the difference, it's not the one who is doing the project, but it's the supervisor. So please be aware, what are your skills on project management and in generally, and in particular on running research projects. And if you realize there are some gaps, then try to understand which type of management skills do I need. Now, a commercial project will not be done by an apprentice, usually. While a doctoral research project, by definition, will be done by an apprentice, which is a doctoral student. Yeah, so this is also one difference. And a commercial project is driven by creating solutions, while a research project is driven by examining problems. So no solutions in there, right? And finally, a commercial project leverages on past project experiences, while a research project by default is a first-timer, unless you take your second doctorate. So there might be earlier learning, but it will be limited. And it's important to understand those elements that are unique to research projects, because they also will take up some time. It's a good thing.
We actually,
yeah.
So we had one comment that it was saying, to me, it would seem that a DBA looks more like a commercial project rather than a research project. Is that the case?
No. I would argue it is not the case. I mean, you might be asked in a doctorate of business administration to make use of certain methodologies over others. You might see a more business-like communication that has a higher focus on the outcome of the research rather than what the research is doing. But if it is a doctoral level qualification, if you are expected to learn what a doctoral stands for, undertaking research, and engaging in critical analytics, establishing and isolating problems, drawing on the literature, so to examine problems, then I would argue you're here very on the right side, but not on the left side. You might have a well-defined timeline with regards to end, and this is what also is acknowledged here on the right side. Running out of time is a real risk. But everything else, I would put you here on the right side, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. So what do commercial and research projects then have in common? Both are developed and delivered based on best practice. So if you put together a project plan in a commercial project, you certainly build on best practice. And the very same thing can be done in a research project. You can look on how other projects have been put together, what is comparable research, what are the related studies, which methods have they been applying, what time allocation has been used there, what is it known that worked out well there and not. So actually, a research project requires as little creativity as a commercial project. You're not creative on putting the project together. You might have a creative idea, but once you put the project plan together, you will follow the best practice and established standards. So that comes to the second point. A research project, as much as a commercial project, needs a sound management. So if you don't have a clue about management or project management, then perhaps it might be advisable to get some understanding on that end. Now, both projects come with a Gantt or flow chart or any type of visualization on how things belong together and are carried out. That will allow you to have a better understanding on where you put in the time and once you progress to keep track of it, right? And both require a defined budget, which is important because if you do not have budget, you might need more time. You might need more time to earn in the money to do certain things, or you might need to wait or skip things because there are no financial means to realizing them. And finally, consider cost for training, travel, and participation at events is something that also is foreseen in both projects, and it will take time in both cases. Yeah. What type of training do you need? Where do you factor in that training? Do you get that training in parallel of your literature review, of your methodology workout? And at which point in time is it realistic that you could take that training? The training might be related to the methodology used. So obviously you only can undertake that training after you settled on the methodology that you will be using. And only once you settled on the methodology, you will understand when is this training available. Let's say you will be doing focus groups, but you've never done focus groups. What do? Do you just read a book about focus group and then you try it yourself? That might be one of the means. Or is there some training available at your university, in other university or somewhere else on how to conduct focus groups using SPSS? Anything that your research needs. So have you foreseen this time already in advance? And where did you foresee it? And what will you be doing in parallel or could be doing in parallel? Now, those are all things that might to be considered and that ultimately can cost time. And if the time has been not foreseen anywhere, then that might become an issue. So there's a student, sorry. There's a question, Sonia. I had the thought that as a doctorate student, we are to enumerate solutions to businesses for development or improvement, since we are researching on the specific area and that we have a leverage of knowledge than others. How do I respond to that best to still make the message clear? Now, research always, any type of research has the same objective. You have an outcome expectation, let's say cancer research. You want to research something that can kill that cancer, that specific cancer. Yeah. So this is what you want. But now you do not go off with the question, how can I kill that cancer? Jacqueline, can you tell me how can I kill that cancer? Could I perhaps? And off I go and speculate. This is not what we are doing. What we are doing is we look at which cures are available to kill that cancer. And we understand that cure A is only working for people up to 70 years. So then we ask ourselves, so why isn't that cure working if someone is 71? What is happening here? So we look into that. We study it in depth, and we will understand eventually why from the age of 70 that cure is not working. And once we understood why it's not working, at that point in time, we will know whether or not we can make that cure ever working for someone who has 71 years. But the outcome very well can be, no, that cure won't work for people over 71. So cancer cure A is out. And that was your doctoral research project. Now comes the next one in, the next doctoral student, and does the very same job for cancer cure B. And after 100 doctoral students, we will perhaps understand that no one older than 70 will ever get a cure against cancer based upon the knowledge we hold today. Or we might get a cancer cure which consists of a combination of things. So we do have our outcome expectation, which is clearly articulated, but our focus on what we are doing is we undertake research, right? This is why you get a research doctorate, I would argue. But now this sounds simple, but we have a webinar dedicated to exactly that trickiness, because there are doctoral programs that clearly outline that they focus on development. Now, if this is the case, then however, everything else needs to be defined new, right? Then you won't have a research problem. Then you might have a development problem, development objective. So the entire ontology must fit to what the program expects you. Traditionally, research works over research problems, okay? Now, before we come into point 3, are there any further questions on that matter?
No, the just comment was the I get it. Thanks for the clarification.
All
The last
right.
one.
So, third, how to cope with the component of uncertainty and emergence within research projects. Now, there are a number of ways. And we've seen before, project management skills are important. And if you have project management skills, then you know what to do. You build in buffers. Now, we have also seen initially there are some natural buffers already built in. Time to admission, time your thesis supervisor will read, time you wait for the viva to be scheduled. So there's a lot of dead time by definition built in, and which you do not need to put on top. So there are buffers. Understand where they are and how you will use them. Now, another thing is, if you have a proposal, understand past dependencies and alternatives, if there are any. Again, this is very much a project management thing, and it can be well trained. You perhaps already get it. Project management skills are a friend if you have them. Now, another thing is you could include uncertainty. You could foresee different pathways that your research might take in the research plan. In particular, if you have been doing a good literature review initially, then you are already aware about how research might progress. Like, okay, perhaps I undertake focus groups, but perhaps I also do interviews, and perhaps I also need to do other things. So do I do that in a sequential way, or do I do it in parallel? So in the case I run out of plans, and perhaps a pragmatic approach that already can be foreseen is change linear, sequential to parallel, right? If you have it already in your research plan, there will be no discussion later. And if there should be discussion, it comes at the right time initially. And finally, get certainty. Test methods out, get research training, benchmark your work, engage stakeholders early, but perhaps not too early, otherwise they are later not available to you. So all of that can be done, and it's in any other project. Yeah, get certainty. How do you deal with emergence? Now, we talked already about research as emergent. You initially have a fair plan of what you will be doing, but the detailed knowledge you will only get as more as you get into your research. Things will emerge. So you might want to make emergence already part of your methodology. You might want to foresee that. You might want to look into related studies and how they have progressed. Yeah, so you might want to build emergence into the process. Show how earlier knowledge, you conduct first a survey, will be taken into the next phases of the research. Based on the surveys, you will conduct focus group. Based on the knowledge you get generated in that survey, through that survey. Yeah, so you foresee that already. And again, you foresee different pathways that your research might take in the research plan. So emergence is dealt with in the same way as uncertainty. Also with regards to get used to work with emergence. Test methods out, get research training, benchmark your work, get stakeholders early. So the same things, training, practice, foresee, anticipate. Don't give things a chance to slip out of your hand. Yeah? Be well prepared. All right. Any questions to that?
Yes, we have one. Do you have recommendations on action research training or books?
Right. Not on a particular book. On training, well, I think there are a lot of training offers available. I would perhaps rather start over a different angle. Look at action research projects that are doing, that have been doing what you are foreseen to do. The importance and meaning of related studies is not to be underestimated. Research is about building on the state of the art, which also means people will have been done what you are expected to do. So you do not need to envision anything. So first of all, get hold of related studies. Now, this is a tricky thing because you might not still be in the knowledge position that you are aware about related studies. So therefore, I would argue that training that at this point in time you might rather need is to understand what are related studies, so identification of related studies. If you want to train that, take a look at our course on issue identification. You can sign up for free. All of the materials are available for free. Take a look into it. That will put you in the position to better understand how to identify related studies. Once you identified related action research studies, you know exactly which type of training you still would be needing. What do you understand already from how those studies work and what is still unclear and therefore needs some further training. Does that make sense?
This is great, thank you.
Okay, good. Now, let's go into the final part of the webinar. Why adjustment can be easier than initial planning. Now, I find it much easier when students come to me once their research is already halfway through. The problems that those students then face might be more urgent because research has gone wrong. Now, at the end of the day, research never can go entirely wrong if you've eyed to the basics. Yeah, you collected your data based on fair assumptions that you had. Therefore, you were drawing on a methodology that by that point in time you considered would work out. So you did your planning. Yeah, you did your basic work. Now, research is emergent, and then you see, okay, what you initially anticipated actually didn't work out. So again, and that comes back to the earlier question, recommendations on training or books. Recommendation is look for related studies because they can provide you with the orientation to adapt your work. Yeah. At that point in time, you have a clear understanding about the related studies and you can tune your work accordingly and justifiably. You have some data and can take informed decision based on what the analytics tell you. So it's not speculation or random guessing. You have data and your analytics tell you that something should be in that and not that direction. Therefore, related literature seems to be that and that. Okay? So you found relevant frameworks at that point in time through the related studies that allow you to picture the generic steps and put them into concrete tasks, right? Remember the 1 to 25, the linear pathway? Once you know where you are, once you have a clear understanding, and once you know what is still missing, and once you have the data at hand, that will provide you with all of the ingredients to take your work further. Okay? So for this reason, once students come to me that are halfway through, it's much easier to work with them because they have already data at hand. They can work fact-oriented rather than envisionary, as often is the case at the start of the studies. Okay. So how to adjust your research projects then? as said, understand where you are. What are the blank spots that you still have? What needs a redesign in accordance to, for example, the related studies you found, or to the data you collected, or for the data that are still missing, and therefore you need to conduct another data collection process, whatever that is. And look back, try to learn from the past. How accurate have your past estimates been on the time? And how can that support your frontward estimates? Yeah, where have you gone wrong? And what can we learn from that? That will help you to adjust your research plan. Are there any questions till this point?
None in the chat.
Not in the chat. So if you would want to take that further, if you're still at the beginning, then the thesis proposal course here could provide you with some more clarity on how to plan your thesis and the time estimates. If you're already halfway through or further in the process, then you might want to take a look at either the writing up your thesis course that we have on offer, or the issue identification. All our courses are freely accessible, so no risk. Just take a look at the materials and study them through. And if you do need a tutor to be assigned, we can source one for you. So with this, let us go off the record and open the floor to discussion.